So I want to talk story structure, but in order to do that, I really need to talk about an idea that kind of goes hand in hand with it, and that is story values. So McKee defines story values as the universal qualities of human experience that may shift from positive to negative or negative to positive from one moment to another. These are sort of core values at the heart of like how characters are defined, and so let's go ahead and talk at some examples of these. So things like alive versus dead. A character can swing sort of on a gradient towards basically I realize sort of alive and dead is a very sort of permanent binary sort of thing, but I guess when we talk about like in a video game, your health meter is very much a gradient. So as you sort of become more alive, you have more health. We go back down to death, and that's sort of less health. Things like wisdom and foolishness is very much this is sort of a spectrum that can be sort of traversed over a scene. Oppressed versus empowered, how our characters feel empowered by a situation or oppressed from one moment to another. Strength versus weakness is something we very much sort of see evidence for in a video game. Is like from one moment to another we feel strength or lack of it, and just kind of a whole host of the list could go on infinitely as far as like what values are important for any particular sort of scene. And so let's go ahead and just kind of look at an example scene and see how the core value of empowered versus oppressed can be affected by the narrative. So imagine this hypothetical combat setup in Uncharted 4, for instance. So Nathan Drake, and we're just gonna like look at how the value of oppressed versus empowered changes over time based on this narrative. So Nathan Drake and his brother Sam are exploring the Scottish Highlands. So when they encounter a patrol of enemies, they drop into grass in time and were not seen. So this is a net positive. They sneak closer, and Nathan comes up behind an unaware soldier. This is also positive. The soldier unexpectedly turns and sees Nathan. He calls out to his buddies. This is negative. Nathan punches out the soldier. This is positive. And then runs to hide from the other soldiers, but it's too late. They spot him and begin to shoot. So this is, pretty negative. Nathan Drake makes it to cover. This is small positive. He transfers covers, flanks the enemy, and returns fire, killing one of them. And as they scramble and fire back, he ducks into cover again, and safe. Positive. A grenade lands next to Nathan. This is definitely negative. He desperately breaks from cover and charges towards the nearest enemy, but taking damage from gunfire. This is negative. Nathan exchanges blows with his enemy, punching back and forth, and knocks the guy off the cliff. So positive, but he's hit from fire behind. Someone's shooting him. An armored shotgun enemy is advancing. So this is negative. Nathan dives into cover and blind fires at this enemy. But the enemy is unfazed and continues to advance on him. Negative. Nathan Drake retreats, falls back to another cover's position, returns fire this time, and this time hits the mark and knocks off the enemy's helmet. So this is a positive. But now Nathan Drake's run out of ammo. He's out. This is negative. The soldier continues to advance, and it's looking kind of hopeless. Negative. Without any other choices, Nathan Drake jumps out of cover and punches the soldier. This is a little bit of a positive, but the enemy shoves Nathan off his feet onto the ground, negative. He raises his shotgun to finish Drake off to end this, super negative. All of a sudden, Sam pops out from cover and chokes the soldier from behind, positive. Nathan jumps to his feet and punches the soldier out. That's the last of them, positive. So it was a hard fight, but they survived, and the player feels powerful from overcoming the enemies, even more so because they almost died. So big positive, they get reward, they get more ammo, maybe they find some secrets, and the end result here for this particular scene, as we can see, is essentially a net positive of empowered. So that's essentially the idea of story values and how they change over scenes. So essentially these individual sort of like moments where things change, these events are this happens over and over throughout sort of a story. So over the course of a story, the primary values at stake for the protagonist change many times and undergo major sort of reversals at the climax of each act, culminating in sort of the greatest reversals or the end of the story. So going from a major negative to a major positive, like I explained at the end of that last scene, was the sort of climax for that particular scene. And it's the climax, it's that moment when we have the most contrast from one moment to another that creates the most emotional response. It's that value contrast. And so essentially story is made up of acts. The 3-act story is pretty popular in screenwriting, but sometimes you'll have 5. I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is an example of having 7 acts. Acts are built up of sequences. Sequences are built up of scenes. Scenes we also call sort of setups in gameplay language, I guess, and then scenes are built up of individual beats, which are sort of these moments, as I was describing in the previous example. And so we've got essentially these story values that sort of take ups and downs as we head throughout the story, and then we have these major sort of reversals as we reach sort of the climax, and these are the most dramatic sort of moments. So you could write a really bad story where 2 characters sort of hate each other at the beginning of the story, and then over time they gradually love each other, and say there's no variation. It's just like over time they just gradually end up in love, and it'd be really boring because there's not really any surprises to that, and moment to moment the amount of change that you're seeing is actually pretty minimal. It's changing on a very sort of slow sort of scale, and that it does eventually get to a point of love where we are happy for the characters. It takes its time, and we sort of get bored long before it's over. But instead, we write a story where the characters hate each other at first, but then they begin to respect each other, but then one of them is betrayed by the other. Then it turns out that was a misunderstanding, so we're back up. They make up. Then they fight, they make up, they fight again, and eventually decide towards the end to split up and never see each other again. But then in the end, they risk everything for each other, and the story ends with them living happily ever after. So it's these moments of ups and downs. That's where the real feeling of the emotion sort of takes place. And the hard part, I mean, of course we could just like make this sort of ridiculous kind of jagged curve, but the hard part is it really has to make sense. It has to feel real and believable to follow the rules of the game, the story's world. So when you're writing a story, you have access to a lot more sort of variance in how you use story values. When you have characters and dialogue, you have a lot more access to sort of the depth of human emotional experience. But generally, this kind of falls outside of the responsibilities of the level designer, and as such, it's outside of the context of this course. So, as environmental designers, we are also writing narrative or story, but the tools that are at our disposal are a lot more blunt. It's our job to assist and enhance with the written narrative, but essentially, we're the ones that actually adapt the story to our medium, the story of play. I guess essentially, without the level, it's it's a movie. It's a novel. It's a play. That sort of thing. It's so by playing through our level, the player sort of experiences hopefully the similar sort of emotional arc that the protagonist themselves does, and that's kind of what the structure for our level does. So let's look at, instead of straight up story values, let's look at some of the environmental values that we have at our disposal that we've talked about.